This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here on a wonderful sunny end of summer day in Toronto with Mr. Marc Beyer from Leon Beyer in Alsace. How are you today, sir?
I'm very fine, and enjoying such a good day in Toronto.
It's wonderful at the very end of the summer like this.
It looks to be midsummer here.
Now, questions for you. Your family have been growing grapes in Alsace since the 16th century.
Oh, we are in the books since 1580.
Oh, goodness me,
that's quite a long time, and I do represent the 13th generation.
Well, I always think of your family's house as being very, very traditional when it comes to Alsace production. How would you say that translates into the glass, and how would you describe those steps of tradition that come to make the wine at the end of the day?
Well, I would say, something very important, as we have always considered the wine to be part of life and not just the only one thing in life, and part of life, that means part of a meal, and to be a complement for food. And my father, for example, was called to be one of the greatest food experts in Europe before me. I'm also a member of the board of Association Prosper Montagnier in Paris, which is the only one association who includes all the jobs involved in gastronomy.
Right, I see.
Chef, baker, pâtissier, butcher, seafood, cheese, any job involved in gastronomy. So that means, when we are producing a wine, even in a cellar, it's always thinking about the pleasure we may have later with food around the table.
Now, when that actually comes to the glass, how do you identify an Alsatian wine that's been made in a much more contemporary style or something made in a traditional style?
I'm sometimes very hard about nowadays, because there was an easy evolution towards sweetness. In the 80s came in a new regulation about late harvest wine and Grain Noble. And these wines were sold at much higher prices as usual. So it gave the impression to the growers that sweet is better than dry. And finally that sweet wave declined on the classic range as well, what I really hate, because it's no more food wine, it's just a show wine.
Yes. Now, when it comes to methods of production, what makes the traditional differ from perhaps more contemporary production?
There is not much difference. We can say, like all over the world, that there was maybe a race about concentration, picking late to have more concentration, more of everything. But as you know, in cooking, more of everything is not the finesse. The finesse is the balance.
Of course.
I say always, a great chef, the best sauce is maybe with cream, but it's not because you have a double cream that it would be better. It's the opposite. And in wine, it's the same. You have to pick in time to have a good balance, a good freshness, to have a wine which looks good for tasting, but also give you the envy to have a second glass.
People often ask me about the Alsace Grand Cru system. And some people have their issues with the way that was split up in the past. And it seems to me, through reading history about this, that a lot of it was political as opposed to being about the vineyard designation themselves.
Yeah, well, it came in because Grand Cru has a prestige and did allow to growers, to sell at better price for their good wines, which is not too bad, because Alsace was not really giving the money back to the vintner. The average price you can see nowadays is quite very interesting for the drinker, the consumer, and not always for the grower. Now in the 80s, the Union of Growers of Alsace was looking a way to promote the best wines, and say better pricing. So one say, use Grand Cru. Grand Cru, you will be able to sell it at double the price.
Simply because it was Grand Cru, yes.
For sure. But Alsace was the only one region in France which used what nowadays is international varietal system. And contrary to Burgundy, where you have only Pinot Noir for red and Chardonnay for white, it's easy when you have one varietal to give the name of the vineyard. But if in the same vineyard you can have 7 varietals like in Alsace, if you give the name of the vineyard, you're confusing everything, because between a Riesling, a Gewurtztraminer or a Pinot Gris, there is a huge difference. And this is why traditionally Alsace always employed the varietal first, and then had a system close to Champagne, where you never give the name of the vineyard. It's the Champagne, the Brut Vintage, the Dom Pérignon, it's a brand. Alsace was a Riesling Reserve, a Riesling Jubilé for my dear friend Dugal, Frédéric Emile for Trimbach, Count of Aiguisem for Beyer, These are brand names, you know. Naturally, we do produce these top wines only in the best vineyards, and these vineyards have been classified Grand Cru. But we refused, as well as Strimbach and Hügel, to enter the system because it was made politically.
I understand.
You know, to avoid to make it too complicated with 7 varietal on 120 kilometer wine road, they limited the number of cru to 51. And 51 cru on 120 kilometer is to laugh at, you know, because when you go to Burgundy, every 200 meters or 500 meters you have another name. And it's the soil change, you need another name, and the soil changed so many times that if you really had a cru system in Alsace, you would need 1,000 names and not 51.
51 would be,
that's the trick, and this is why we say this is a political decision and not a quality decision.
Where do you feel that Alsace sits on the world wine stage today?
Too often in a niche situation.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's not such big. Alsace produces 150 million bottle wines a year. But in regards to the French production or to the European one or the world one, it's a drop in the ocean, you know.
I wasn't aware that Alsace was the 5th smallest wine region in France.
It's maybe not the smallest, but it's very limited.
Yes, I was quite surprised.
No. And, you know, it's only 25% who is exported around the world. So the volume which is on this market, for example, is limited, you know.
So most of it being consumed within France itself?
Sure, it's a very popular brand in France, you know, home consumed. That means also that most of the wine is sold in supermarket, which is not always the best way to get some money back, you know.
Well, Marc, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today, alongside all of these school children. We look forward to tasting your wines at lunch today and continuing this conversation later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was nice to see you. Thank you.